Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my book review of the book Star Wars Mace Windu, The Glass Abyss by Stephen Barnes. Fans of the Star Wars expanded universe will recognize the name Stephen Barnes probably, as he wrote the novel The Cestus Deception, which was a Clone Wars era book that came out back in like 2004. And this book this edition of this book has a novella at the end titled The Hive, which Stephen Barnes also wrote. And I remember reading this probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and I did not like this one, The Cestus Deception. It was too weird, too into sci-fi stuff that I don't care about, and so I just didn't care for it. Didn't give it a. This is before I wrote reviews. This is when I was just getting into reading. I wrote this one, but didn't care for this. But I'm always willing to give every book a chance. And so 20 years later, Stephen Barnes has a canon novel titled Mace Windu, The Glass Abyss. And I'm going to be pretty honest. Didn't like this one either. Really didn't like this one. I think it's because there is a brand of science fiction that Stephen Barnes likes and is evidently trying to emulate in this book and in the original and in the Cestus Deception that he wrote. And I think it is pretty obvious that he has one vision for Star Wars, and I have a completely different vision in the terms of what I like to read and what I enjoy and where I think Star Wars should go. This book is largely standalone. There are a smattering of references here and there to other elements. There's a few times where the words "the High Republic" is just referenced barely, so that's one of those things that would let you know, oh, obviously this was released during the canon time. If you take a few of those out, you could have convinced someone outside the space-time continuum that this was an EU book, because it would have fit perfectly with the Cestus Deception or any of the other Clone Wars era books, although this one takes place immediately after the Phantom Menace. And so The Glass Abyss is about Mace Windu completing a mission that Qui-Gon never could. Qui-Gon had gone to the planet of Metagos and was on a mission to help the people there and also stop a villain there. And Qui-Gon has cut short when he has to go do some other stuff, and so he leaves Mace Windu a message that basically says, if I die, please go to Metagos and help these people. And so immediately after the events, this book happens right after the funeral pyre in Phantom Menace. And right after that, Mace Windu gets that message and decides to take some time and go to Metagos off he's not working on behalf of the Jedi Council at this moment. It's more of a personal matter, but he goes to try to help out and deal with this issue that's on the planet. And that premise alone isn't my favorite premise, but I'm willing to give stuff like this a try. But the book really devolves into this kind of creature feature science fiction and this heavy world building science fiction that feels more in place in other science fiction properties and less in place with Star Wars. Star Wars stories tend to be galaxy hopping, tend to be referential to other things, tend to be very much rebellion versus empire type things. There's like a formula to the traditional Star Wars story, and this book does not follow the formula at all. There is one element of the formula, which is the rebellion versus a major power type thing, but even that isn't followed exactly in the way that you would normally do the formula. And so because of that, the book just feels odd and just weird and just not in line with the other Star Wars canon books. It feels like Stephen Barnes, I don't believe, is necessarily that type of Star Wars fan that reads all the books or necessarily is involved in all the material. I think he's certainly watched Star Wars and probably watched it a lot as a kid, but he also has the brand that he likes in science fiction. One example of this is there is a lot of time devoted to this species on this planet, which is basically an insectoid spider-like species, which has this, mother character that has all these babies that she stored up and therefore has been having for generations, and her children are based off of, what rank they are, and so they have a number by them. And there's also this element of instead of calling it the Force, they call it the Web, and there's this whole really elaborate world building behind these creatures and the species and the planet. And Star Wars can do world building and weird creatures and stuff, that happens. But it's usually very much on the minimal side. For example, in the Book of Boba Fett, you get this creature in the first episode that's attacking Boba Fett, and the creature's dead, and you don't need to know all that stuff about the creature. But in here, there's a lot of time spent to it. And it felt like there was a conscious decision, whether it was on Stephen Barnes' part or whether it was on the editorial team, to make this stand out and to make it into that science fiction-y explore the creature stuff. So the books goes along at a very glacially slow pace for me. And so it's just all stuff that just didn't connect with me. Another major problem I had with the book is that Mace Windu didn't really feel like Mace Windu. He felt like he could have been literally any other character. He doesn't have a ton of personality, and the journey that he goes on in this book could have fit basically any other character. And in fact, I wish it had been an original character. Create your own Jedi character that you want that goes on this journey. I think that would have worked better. But because it's Mace Windu, there is a voice that Mace Windu has to have. There is an expectation of how he's going to act. There is a rigidness that he has to have. There is a rule-followingness that he has to have. And from the first chapter, he doesn't seem to have that. The way he acts in this book does not seem consistent with Mace Windu. It feels more consistent with an Obi-Wan character. Not everything in this book was Obi-Wan-like, but Obi-Wan and Windu are very different personalities. They're both rule followers, but in different ways, and so it just didn't feel like Mace Windu. The dialogue never felt like Mace Windu. Yoda, who shows up very briefly in the book, did feel like Yoda. I will give Stephen Barnes credit. He got Yoda correct, but it just didn't feel like he got Mace Windu, and the whole book is Mace Windu's book. He is the character in like every chapter. So it just all those elements, the characters, the world building, the plot, none of it particularly worked. Now I'm going to take a moment and give the book some praise. I thought that the character of Chulok, which is this dual entity, which is the villain, it is basically two creatures that have basically somehow, and I won't say exactly how, meshed into one. Two different species that are basically one creature now. And so it's two minds that work together, are linked, and so sometimes one of them speaks, sometimes the other one speaks, sometimes both of them speak, sometimes they're just thinking with each other, telepathically type thing. It is a really fascinating villain, Chulok. It's the two characters Chew and Locke together, Chulok. Thought that was a incredibly creative way for the villain, and I thought that it worked for the story, and Chulok's character was actually pretty smart and competent, and I thought that Chulok worked for what the story needed Chulok to do. Also, an appropriate use of they/them pronouns. So there were some things like that I did enjoy, but just for the most part, the vast majority of the book was boring, uninteresting, and didn't feel like Star Wars. And I'm all for when Star Wars makes a bold swing. My favorite Star Wars novel, Kenobi by John Jackson Miller, is a space western and is written in a style that a western, with the tropes and the plot that a western would have. But it indelibly felt like Star Wars, and the pacing of the book and the type of story it told felt like a Star Wars story. And maybe it's because it's on a familiar planet, Tatooine, but still, it felt like Star Wars, and this just didn't do that for me. And I feel bad because that's two Stephen Barnes books that I've read now that I didn't like. Now, maybe one day I will pick up an original novel that is not part of another franchise by Stephen Barnes, and I might enjoy it. But even then, this brand of science, I have certain brands of science fiction. I like the space opera stuff. I love the hard science fiction about space exploration, and I love military sci-fi. The creature feature just has never connected with me anyway. I'm not saying it never will. Maybe there is a book that would, but it just didn't here. So I did not particularly like this book. And I can understand there are certain people that this probably will work for, but if I had to guess, I think the book's just going to fall flat for people. I don't envision a lot of people hating the book or thinking it's the worst Star Wars book they've read by any means. But I don't think it's going to get a huge outpouring of love. I don't think word of mouth on this book is going to do pretty well. And so the book, as far as I know, didn't hit the New York Times list when it came out, and it's unlikely to have solid sales numbers long term. I think that the other Star Wars books that came out this year, I think will have more longevity in the discussion and also in the fandom than this one will. I think that this is going to be a flash pan. It is going to, because of how different it is going to make a big splash, people go to talk about it, and then it's going to just not be talked about a lot. And, when you're writing for tie-in fiction, you can do standalone stuff, but especially with the way today's fandoms work, you really need to be connected to other stuff. And this book just doesn't feel connected. It feels very disconnected. So I just think, from a marketing perspective, if I have my business hat on, this book I don't think is going to do the business that Random House Worlds wants it to do. So overall, I did not particularly care for the book. I'm going to give it like a 4. It's competent. The plot is competent. It makes sense. There's not like plot holes in the book. And I think that the villain was handled really well. I really liked the villain. That's the one thing that's going to last with me for a while. However, when I look at the book as a whole, just didn't care for it. I didn't like it. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. So if you've read Mace Windu, The Glass Abyss, let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.